You're listening to the Mind Over Finger podcast, episode number 68.
Welcome to the Mind Over Finger podcast, discussions on mindful music making, efficient practice, and building a purposeful career. And now, your host, Dr. Renee Paul Gauthier.
Hi, everyone. If you're listening to this episode around the time it comes out, you're like the rest of us in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic. And I know there's a lot of fear and uncertainty going around, but I hope you've had the chance to also experience moments of peace and joy. And I have the perfect guest for you in that regard this week. I'm speaking with a fabulous guest, double bass player Lauren Pierce. Lauren is a highly regarded soloist, and she's known for her hugely popular YouTube channel, which features her virtuosic performances and has more than 13,000 followers and 1.3 million views. She brings an impressive performance repertoire to the table, playing works designed for more versatile and manageable smaller instruments. Her profound enthusiasm for the double bass and her carefully planned and hugely effective lessons also make her a vastly respected and popular educator. This year, Lauren launched her own online education program, the Virtuosity Blueprint, and she's a frequent clinician at several workshops throughout the country. Among many things, we discuss her highly intentional and effective approach to learning new repertoire, how our habits and our rituals create the life we have, and the importance of having clarity in building a career. As you'll hear in our conversation, Lauren is an amazingly thoughtful musician who's put a great amount of effort in refining the process of practicing and expanding her skills in artistry. I think you'll find her love of music and how she talks about it really inspiring, and personally, I know that this is just what I needed to hear these days. This is an information and inspiration-packed conversation, and I hope you enjoy. Let's go to the show. Lauren Pierce, I'm so excited to have you on the show today.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Lauren, you have such a very unique career. You really kind of created this new niche for musicians. And, you know, I feel like you've been described as a musical innovator, and that's really what I feel like when I think about you. And so for the listeners who are maybe not familiar with the world of the double bass, can you tell us a little bit about you, how your musical journey has unfolded and how you got to where you are?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you. It's really nice of you to say. I am a bass player. I play the double bass, and I am a classical soloist or concert artist, whatever you would prefer to call it. And I started playing bass, back in middle school, but I really didn't put much effort into it. If I'm completely honest, I just wasn't as driven until I got to college at the University of South Carolina. And there was just something about it that I became almost obsessed with it. Like I just couldn't get enough. And I went through many different career paths options, so the first one, I guess, was just sort of like, do I want to be a performer or do I want to be a teacher? Mm-hmm. And then from there, I decided, no, I want to perform. I love this. And then it was like, okay, do you want to play orchestral music? Do you want to, play more solo music? Do you want to be a chamber musician? That kind of thing. And I went through a few different options, a few different career paths. And long story short, I had decided by the end of my undergrad that I just wanted to be a soloist, which of course terrified my mother. And, understandably for sure. And then I decided that I was going to go get a master's, and the path that I had decided for myself at that point was, well, I also really love teaching. I just don't really love, being a group teacher. In other words, I didn't feel like I would be very great as like an orchestra director. I really loved teaching private lessons, one-on-one. And so I decided that I was going to go and get a master's and then a doctorate at the University of North Texas, and then pursue a career in academia as a professor somewhere. And I got there, and I loved studying with my teacher, Jeff Braditich. He was such a huge figure in my life, but unfortunately, I didn't super fit in well in academia. And I think it just, at that point in my life, like all I wanted to do was play my instrument. All I wanted to do was practice. And I was not the most academic focused person. And getting a master's it just wasn't right. And so I stayed for about a year, and then ultimately decided that I needed to at least take a break. And so I left. And then after that, I felt frankly quite lost, with what I was doing. I wasn't playing a whole lot of music. I was working in retail. I was actually working a couple jobs, neither in music. I would play like a wedding gig every once in a while, but I really felt like I had no idea what I was doing, what I should do, what direction I should go. And then I guess it was about a year after I left school, I was doing a couple auditions for competitions, and I had to make these videos, and I think I had to upload them to YouTube. I've told this story so many times, and I just never actually check on the facts here, but I can't remember if I sent them the videos directly or if I had to upload them to YouTube first. But either way, I did. And then I just kind of left them there. Like, I'm sort of a late adapter to technology. And so in true me form, I just uploaded them and was like, what do I do now? I'll just ignore them for 6 months. And I noticed I started getting a lot of emails from YouTube. And again, very on brand for me. It just was like, oh, that's weird. And I didn't look at them at all. And then one day I went back and checked my videos, and I can't remember the number of views. I mean, it wasn't terribly high, but it was a lot for me. It was like maybe 1,000, on each one. And these comments of people that were actually nice, which is like, I learned quite rare on YouTube, as you get more, more and more views anyway. Mm-hmm. And then there was just something in me that was like, I wonder if there's something to this. Like, I love solo music. I don't have a stage to perform at. Like, Carnegie Hall hasn't called in a while. So maybe this is a way to perform, And so one thing led to another. And within 6 months or so, I started recording performance videos and making music that way, performing that way. I really started focusing on just getting myself out there, because I felt like if people could just hear me play, then they might want to hear me play again. And that might be a way to at least convince, venues to want to have me come and perform. But more than anything, it just gave me something to do. It was like an outlet, as a performer, you need an outlet, you just need to get that music out to people. And sometimes it doesn't really matter so much where it is, and so I did that, really just for the sake of, I needed something to do. I don't know if I was necessarily thinking like, oh, I'm going to be a famous YouTuber, like, so many other double bass soloists in like history, but it sort of, a couple videos caught on, and I started getting more views, and really it's sort of just one thing led to another, and suddenly like I had several videos that I had done and a lot of views, and a lot of people had seen my videos and liked what I did. And yeah, it's been amazing. And really that's the only way that I can describe what I do in my career, because it's hard to describe, saying that I am a YouTuber isn't quite right. To say that I'm an online educator, that doesn't really encapsulate it. To say that I am a soloist, that's true, but that's also not really the full story, so it's a lot of things. And you're right when you say that it is unique. If I were to instruct someone how to do this themselves, I would have no idea where to start. I would just sort of be like, let's do what I do, So that's kind of what I do.
That's amazing. Listening to your story, I really love how you really took the time to reflect and listen to what you wanted instead of just go with what's there or what others are doing. I feel like, it's so easy to disregard what we're thinking and look for outside answers and ask our teachers, what did you do? What can I do? What is there for me? Instead of really thinking, what do I want? And I feel like in a way you kind of very poetically followed the breadcrumbs. And I love how it's turning into, I don't know if we call it an umbrella brand, but you were talking and I kept thinking, well, you are Lauren Pierce, so it's very unique what you do. It encompasses what you're saying, the teaching and the soloing, and
Thank you.
I'd love to hear about your approach to many things. I'd love to hear about many things, but your approach to practicing, but also the fact that what you're doing for the double bass right now is really great, because you're playing a lot of repertoire that comes from other instruments, and you're kind of really redefining the repertoire for the double bass. I'd love to hear about that.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. And, it's something that bass players have been doing for a long time. I am certainly not the first, and I won't be the last to approach it this way. It's just, I've learned that it's an open discussion for us as bass players and the bass community. But, well, first of all, if you've never really hung out with a bass player or talked to them very much about bass, we all love each other. We're all just this big community. And, we are very tight knit. And so the things that we talk about and we know to be true, I think often we, or certainly I, forget that this isn't something that everybody in the music world knows. Far from it, actually. And so, I've noticed that when I talk to people about, playing bass and playing solo music, everyone has one bass player, that they've heard that really just blew them away and they remember it. And that's if they have one, but usually it's just one, and they'll tell a story about hearing this bass player play the Rococo variations or Zigeunerweisen or whatever, and how it just was almost life-changing because they'd never seen a bass player play that way. But there's usually just one, and the thing is that historically it's been quite the same. We don't have a whole lot of solo repertoire that was written for us. And, we could get into like all the historical reasons for that. I am not the one to have that conversation. I would just completely disrespect the history of it. So I'm not going to try. But I do think that, a big part of it is the fact that, our instrument was the foundation of every genre that we were and still are a part of. We're the foundation. And so there was sort of like, maybe why would we write solo music for this instrument? Also, it's big and cumbersome, and like intonation not like, not always fantastic, which, whatever. But basically, to get to the point is that there wasn't historically a lot of solo music written for us. And a big portion of that was written by other bass players,
Mm-hmm.
And so we did have like some soloists, throughout the years, or throughout the centuries, I should say. Giovanni Battistini, who was, probably the most prolific composer for the instrument as well. We had Domenico Dragonetti, who was apparently stunning to watch, but we don't have any recordings of either one of those. And then Serge Koussevitzky, who was a conductor. He also composed, and he was Leonard Bernstein's teacher. And we have recordings of him. And I think what I'm trying to get at is like, we had those few, but they were just a few. And with other instruments, say violin and cello, piano, there were just so many more. And, when you have one person doing something, it's an anomaly. But when you have a handful of people, then it becomes a movement, or it becomes a group. It becomes a method book,
Mm-hmm.
and then you pass it on to further generations. So the fact that, we had the Battistini and Dragonetti and Koussevitzky's at all was amazing and is a testament to them as performers. But, we just didn't get to be pushed in the same way that the other instruments were. So I'm going to wrap up my historical lecture in just a second by just saying that, the reason that I feel like I am able to do what I do, or the reason that I even want to, is because of one moment. I really believe this is Gary Carr, when he played the Swan in the Carnival of the Animals, with Bernstein conducting. It was broadcast to the entire country, And I really believe that that was the first moment, like the most important moment, in our history as bass players, because it was as a transcription, wasn't written for the bass, and B, it was beautiful. No one had ever heard that before on the instrument. No one knew it could sound that way, at least outside of the bass world. Mm-hmm. So to get back to what you asked me, I think it was a couple hours ago, I am not the first person to approach it this way. We've just sort of, as a community, we've gravitated towards pieces that were not written for our instrument because there is a need for that. We wanted to push the instrument beyond the limitations, that we always had. And if you look at bass history, it is just exponentially exploded in terms of the level. It's incredible. It's really exciting, actually, to be a bass player right now, and I have been one of those people that has been really passionate about that, because, you don't have to play incredibly difficult and flashy music in order to be exciting and interesting to people. But there is something that's really special about seeing someone that is just doing the impossible and killing it. It's like they're on fire, That's part of it. And so that is how I approach my practicing as well. This feeling of, how can I make the impossible possible for me, and I've done that. And I have centered my practice regimen around that. I have a very specific way of practicing, and I know it's tedious, and I know not many people would really have a good time practicing that way. But thankfully, I love it. I love practicing, and I also love, the end goal that I'm sort of going for, this number one priority, which is to play pieces that push the boundaries, and And so my practicing is really focused on, taking something that is never meant to be played on an instrument like mine and adapting it. And then not only that, but making it our own. I'm really, really passionate about that. So that's kind of how my practicing has been focused. And after doing that for several years, truthfully, there's not much that I look at that I think I can't play that. It's really just, do I want to spend the time doing it? And that's really freeing. So, yeah.
There's so many things I love in what you said. I don't even know where to begin to unpack. but you were talking about limitations, and this story came to my mind because it's so true. Sometimes there are real limitations, and then there are limitations that are perceived, but that have barriers that can be conquered. And right, like the first person who ran a 4-minute mile, nobody believed it was possible until he did it. I forget what year, it was like in the 50s.
Right.
And I think within a year of him doing it, all of a sudden, so many more people could do it. So in many ways, you're kind of really forging the path for so many bass players who are following behind you. So this is really fantastic.
Thanks. Yeah, I love that story. I tell that story to my students, and most of them have already heard it because it's, such an important part of history. But, when we look at how it relates to us, that's what I mean when I say, that I think the 4-minute mile, for us was Gary Carr playing the Swan. I really do. And then you have many after that, like, I don't know, it'll be different for other people, of course, but for me, seeing Edgar Meyer play Zigeuner Reisen was, one of those moments for me, because when you see someone do something, then you start to think, the first reaction sometimes is that's bananas. Like, I can't do that. But there's that little voice in your head, I think, that goes, well, if he figured it out, maybe I can. Or like, if she's doing it, then maybe it's not so bad. And that's why, I do a lot of practicing on live stream, like on my social media and whatever, because I'm comfortable with, not sounding like super amazing, because I know that I will get to that point where I can fix the problems. And I really love showing people that process because I love practicing. It's one of my favorite things to do. If I could do it all day, every day, I would. However, we have to do other things, and go to work and stuff. But I love the process. And I think sometimes people, it's like, they need to see that it's okay if you can only play something at a quarter of the tempo or even slower. I remember being in, I think it was a Masterclass once at USC. It was, it wasn't a string player. I cannot remember what he played, but he was saying, if you're having to start a piece, like if you can't play it at half tempo or something, then you're not ready to play it. And I thought, okay. But if I actually let that structure or let that affect how I approach practicing, then I would never be able to do any of the stuff that I do. Sometimes I'm starting pieces, at like 1/10 of the tempo I want to be taking it. And for my instrument, I don't know. I think that I have to, me and my instrument, it's required for those, for that. But I don't know if it applies to other instruments. I truly don't know. But I do know that it isn't an indicator necessarily that you're not ready. It just means that your brain needs a little bit more time to process between each note, So I think one thing that I've become more passionate about is showing people that, practicing isn't maybe what they think it is, or I guess a better way to say that is there are so many other things that are practicing, than maybe what you've been doing or what you've been told to do.
Yes.
Yeah.
I always say one of my favorite question in practicing is what else? What else can I try? And what else can I figure out? Or what else can I hear?
I love that.
Would you mind, I'm very curious, would you mind going into a little bit more of the specifics of how you practice? Maybe some examples?
Yeah. Sure. So I have a really specific method for mostly fast stuff, because for a while it was like, how fast can I play? Let's just play fast stuff all the time. But so that's the most clear cut and concise way that I can explain it. However, I do have a system for applying it to music, and also parts of music that aren't just crazy fast. But for this sake, I'll just discuss how I do that. So the first thing that I do when I play a piece of music, or when I decide I'm going to, is I divide it up into like sections. There's the easiest way for me to explain this is to use a piece of music. So if any of you are familiar with the Grand Tango by Astor Piazzolla, is written for cello. There are 3 big sections in it. There's the faster part at the beginning, there's the slow middle section, and then there's the even faster end. Those 3 big sections. And then within those sections, I have, I can't remember the exact number of sections, but it's at least 12, I know. And they're bite-sized pieces. That's the first thing. That's the most important thing for me, aside from getting all the fingerings and bowings down, which I guess that's the first step. That's, I guess, before I even sit down to really practice. It's just sort of assumed I will have worked all of that out ahead of time. I also do a lot of listening before I even start the piece. Because learning a piece of music for me takes so much time to really learn it and really get it ingrained before I even feel comfortable playing it in public, let alone recording it. I want to make sure that I want to spend this much time with this piece of music. I want to make sure that I really like it. And so I listen to it a lot. But I mean, I started that listening even when I was in my undergrad. I listened to a piece so much that I basically have it memorized before I sit down to start practicing it. So those are the first 2 things that I do. And, I also just want to say that when you're doing a transcription, if it's something that's already been done before on the instrument, that's a very different process than if it hasn't. So when I did, let's say Zuckernerweisen, that had already been done many times before. And so I just read straight from the violin part still, but I also learned it with my teacher. That was helpful. And I knew, like, if just the fact that someone had done it, I could either ask my teacher, or I could go and look at the video and be like, how did he do this? This is crazy. But when you're doing something new, you don't have that. You aren't really sure if it's going to work. And I've told this story many times before, but when I decided that I wanted to learn the Herbert Second Cello Concerto, that I think was the first biggest transcription that I decided to do. And it took me about a year to learn it. And I would say maybe like 9 months of that, I wasn't really sure if it was going to be possible, And so there's also, you have to have the time to decide, like, does this actually work? Can I adapt this? And so all of these things are sort of like pre-steps to your question, which was specifically, what do you do when you sit down and practice? So I practice everything with a metronome. Everything. I rarely have my metronome off. I go through a lot of batteries. If anyone wants to donate batteries for me, it would be very much appreciated, so I can eat. But I always practice with my metronome. So let's say I'm starting with a piece, and the first section is something that I need to, really hammer in with a metronome, I decide what is my goal tempo, like just generally. And let's say it's 120. And let's say it's a quarter note, just to make it easy. My goal tempo is 120. So my first step is to divide that in half and start at 60 and see what it feels like to try and play that section at 60. And usually it's still a little bit too fast. My general rule of thumb is the sort of start tempo, especially for the first day of practicing, but this applies all days. The start tempo has to be slow enough to where I can play everything perfectly. And I really do mean that, perfectly. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And also be aware of everything. So if I don't, nail a shift, let's say while I'm doing this first run, I'm aware of it, and I can also, sort of fix it maybe in time, it's sort of like the fastest, slowest tempo that I can start where, I can do that. Play everything in time, in tune, with the right fingerings, bowings, etc. Mm-hmm. And so let's say 60 is too fast. So I go, okay, yeah, I know really quickly. So then I go, all right, let's lower it down by 10 and you start at 50 and then repeat the process. And okay, that's too fast. Let's go down to 40. And then maybe 40 is the one, like maybe that's the tempo where it feels really good. So then I'm like, all right, for real now, let's get serious. This is the beginning of the practice session because 40 is good. So the first day, a lot of it is just sort of like being comfortable and getting close to, what's written on the page. So I might do that section at 40, like 3 times maybe. And then I bump up the tempo. And depending on what the goal tempo is, depending on really the most important factor, which is, how well I can do it, I might bump it up by 5 clicks or I might bump it up by 10. So let's say I bump it up by 10 at 50 and it just doesn't feel right. I don't know how else to explain it. Then I go, all right, that's too much. Let's go to 45, And then at that point, I know everything I need to know in order to structure my practicing from this day forward. So I usually cap it at, I call these tempo levels. So I usually cap it at 9, but even 9 is often too much. So I'm really centering that around my focus. Mm-hmm. I notice that my focus generally starts to wane after about 20 minutes, sometimes less, sometimes a little bit more, but very rarely am I able to be focused longer than 20 minutes. And in my opinion, anything after that focus starts to wane is not worthwhile. It's a waste of time. Unless I'm just trying to practice endurance, but that's a whole other conversation. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so usually, depending on how long a section is, it doesn't vary so much because they're all small sections, like maybe depending on the time signature, speed and everything, between 2 and 4 measures, then 9 tempo levels is usually good, but sometimes I do only 6 or 7. And so the way that I structure it at first, especially when it's not under my fingers and it's not feeling good and I'm making a lot of mistakes, is the first day I'll do 40. Okay, cool. I can bump up to 45. All right, that feels good. And then 50, 55, 60, 65, maybe at 65. Okay, it's like I'm starting to sweat a little bit. It's like I'm starting to make mistakes around here. 65, that would be number 7 for the tempo level. All right, I'm like, this is really hard. Where did I stop? 70, I think. 70, let's say usually this is how it works out weirdly. Around the number 8 or so, things start to really fall apart. And it's like, I can get through it, but only just. And then at that point, when I'm like, there's no way I can possibly play it any faster, I bump up the tempo one more time.
Mm-hmm.
And that gets me to number 9. And usually that one is terrible. And that's the moment. Like, I don't know what other metaphor to use here, but it's like when, I think it was Muhammad Ali that said, when he would do setups, he would only count the ones after it started to hurt, like I kind of feel like it's the same thing here, like, you push yourself as, right to the edge where you think the edge is. And then it's like, okay, but let's go a little bit more, and is it really like, is that how fast you can actually play the section? No, it's not. But that's, I think, at least for me, where the magic sort of happens, even if I just completely fall apart and I can't play the whole thing all the way through, I think it's still important. If anything, just as a signal to my brain, we can do a little bit more. And then I sleep. I mean, not like immediately after doing this, but, like at night I sleep. And then there's something that happens where I wake up the next day and I practice the same thing, and I can do it at that tempo that was too hard a little bit better. And maybe even I can go 5 clicks faster,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so then from there, it's just about like, how do I bump up the tempo? Like it's very mathematic, and I'm super nerdy about it. I get super into it. So, you either just bump up the whole like grouping by 5, or you spread it out to where you're going, instead of by 5, you're going by 10. I mean, like whatever,
Mm-hmm.
You guys are smart. You can figure out different ways to do it, but that's how I practice everything. Like my whole day is that method with some variations in there, like you were saying, how's another way that I can approach this, that kind of thing. I do have variations, but that is my like basic, like the foundation, of my practicing.
Mm-hmm. Wow, I love this so much. It's so helpful. And what I love about it too is that this method itself is fantastic. And I think even the greatest message here is that you're using language such as, at this tempo, I know that, or I notice, or my focus. So it sounds like you're so in tune with your experience, with what you're hearing, what you're, like the kinesthetic sensations, but also your level of focus, your level of awareness. And it's the fact that you figured out this method for yourself. I feel like everyone can also extrapolate this to what method, of course they can inspire themselves from your method, but what other method could you come up with that fits you so well that, then you can say like Lauren, oh, I love practicing. I could do it all day. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
Putting that effort and that reflection into really finding a method that works for all of us. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's something that I notice in students, we don't know what we don't know. Right. And so I know for me, unrelated to practicing or music, but just in general, when I am uncertain about something, I know that it's like, I'm just frantically searching. It's almost like I'm, just floundering all over the place to find the right fit, because I don't know, and no option seems like the right option, or you just aren't sure, And I mean, that's first of all why we have our teachers to guide us, but also, even with like method books, I notice with some students, they'll go from one to another, and it's fine. It's every method I think is worthwhile looking at, but I think you need to spend some time with it, and I feel very strongly about that with practicing, like it doesn't matter how you practice as long as it works for you, but you aren't really going to know if it works for you and you really like it unless you give it a fair shake, and you give it enough time to really solidify, and you will know. And there's a difference between like not enjoying something because maybe it's new, or like maybe you don't like practicing so much, or maybe you are just frustrated because your playing isn't where it needs to be. There's so many reasons, why you might not be, super happy when you're practicing at that given time. But there's a difference between that feeling and the feeling where you realize, this method, I could see how it would work or whatever, but it's just not me, It's just not me. Everybody has a way that they work and a way that they learn that is genuinely them, and it's hard to find, what that is. And I'm still discovering things, about myself and how I learn and how I work. But if you can just be uncomfortable, like, and let yourself be uncomfortable and give it a fair shake, like I would say at least a month for a different practice method, then like that will give you so many answers, if you just stick with it.
Yeah. Yes. Lauren, I'd like to ask you one more question before maybe we launch into the rapid fire question.
Yeah.
And it's because you talked about loving practicing, and that's one of the most important thing in my practice nowadays, which is different than when I was younger. And I see it so much in students, or, maybe people at the beginning of a career where we're very attached to the outcome, to getting the results and winning the job or getting the gig. And what I'm trying to convince everyone is that if you really figure out ways to love practicing and fall in love with that process, the results will come. So what I'm curious about is what are some ways that, what are the things that you love about practicing? How do you, set things up in the way that makes you enjoy it so much?
That's a good question. Gosh, well, I don't know. I have always loved practicing, like I didn't always love practicing. That's a lie. When I was in high school, I didn't love practicing and I didn't do it. And there are many reasons probably for that, but I think I don't know, that spark wasn't there for me. And then when I got to college, I just loved figuring everything out about the instrument. I loved it. And I did love the outcome, and I still do love the outcome. I love performing. I love recording. I love teaching. But I love being in that practice room with my instrument, doing the thing that I know I want to do for the rest of my life. Like when I grow up, I want to be a bass player, and I still have that passion about it. And I don't know if it was anything. I mean, I put a lot of care into the space that I practice, like for sure, I'm one of those people that if a place is messy, then my mind is messy, and so I try to make my space look nice and tidy and pretty. But, and I also have this system that I really enjoy, but I don't know. I think I just really love bass. I don't know. I just really love practicing. And, I am an introverted person. And so I like being alone sometimes, so like practicing in a way, it's like it does tire me out because my instrument is physical, but it also energizes me. It excites me, thinking about the outcome, but also just there's something about the process. And I don't know if that was something that, I don't know if it's something that was created. I imagine it also had to do with, me making a conscious decision well after I left school, actually, that this is what I was going to do, regardless of the outcome. I am fully committed to music, I wonder if that had something to do with it, but I don't know. I think I just really love practicing I really love bass. I really love music. I love everything about it. And like I said, I could do it all day, every day, if given the option, and like, I don't know really if there's any more to it than that,
Mm-hmm. Well, I find that very inspiring.
Thank you.
Lauren, how about a quick round of rapid fire questions?
Sure.
So you have a very unique career. And for the people who are maybe, I don't know if they're dreaming of a career that resemble yours, because maybe they've never heard of a career that resemble yours, but can you tell us a little bit about what it looks like?
Yeah, well, gosh, it's very different from, I don't know, there is no normal, and especially now, in the time that we're in, the arts organizations are having to change really drastically. And they've been changing for a long time, and I think all bets are off, like we as musicians can do whatever we want. And so I think for me, there was something about knowing that my career would be different, just inherently, wanting to be a soloist as a bass player, that I just sort of was like, okay, whatever, and then there were times where I really felt like, am I going the right way? Like, and I was looking for answers for like, am I doing the right things? Is this the right way to do it? And I never quite got those answers because there isn't a right way to do it. So my life is, I practice a lot, like basically as much practicing as I can fit in a day, I do. I do a lot of teaching. I used to freelance quite a bit around the area, so a lot of driving because I live in Texas. Mm-hmm. But I don't do as much of that anymore since I launched my program where it's all teaching. And so I do a lot of teaching. I do a lot of practicing. And yeah, it's a very sort of nebulous kind of day. Like if I only wanted to do the things that, sort of provided income, and that is to say my teaching, then I would have so much more time, but I do see bass as, it's my life. Music is, part of my career. It's everything. I don't know what I'm saying, but it's a huge part of what I do. And it doesn't like bring home the money, always to feed me, but I spend a lot of time practicing and I spend a lot of time educating. So yeah, I don't know if that answers the question of what my life looks like. Sometimes I don't really know what it looks like because it changes a lot,
Mm-hmm. How about a habit that you have that you think contributed to your success?
Consistency, 100%. Mm-hmm. I am a creature of habit, and we all are, really. Like even people who thrive in spontaneity, we need to have things that ground us, I think it was Andy Warhol that said, you either do something once or every day, something along those lines. And I love that because if you do it once, then it's a special thing that you did and that's nice. But then when you do it every single day, like that's a lifestyle. Our lifestyle is made up of these routines and rituals that we do day in and day out, and for me, practicing is part of that, so getting to the instrument every single day. It doesn't have to be 6 hours every day. And I wouldn't encourage that anyway, but, getting to the instrument every day, making, a minimum amount that you can do every day. For me, that in addition to the other routines and rituals that I have in my life, I believe that, that is what's allowed me to do the things that I do.
Mm-hmm. I love that. So important.
Yeah.
How about a quick actionable tip that listeners could implement today in their musical lives?
Get clarity on what you want. I know as musicians and possibly just as people, we're scared to get clarity. And it's okay if you don't know what you want. There's a long time where I didn't. And that was what led me to question, okay, do I want to play orchestral music? Do I want to be a soloist? Do I want this or that? And that's okay. But you have to be clear on what you want in your life. And that is everything from what you want to do, what kind of place you want to live in, how much money you want to make. It's everything. And the times where I have been the most lost and made some of the dumbest decisions, that's because I was unclear about my goals. Like, make a list of priorities, and put them in order. Let that be your guiding light. Because where people get into trouble is, and they work too much and they do things that they don't need to be doing, spending their time on, it's because they aren't absolutely clear on what they want. And it's fine if you don't know what it is. I sometimes still don't know what it is that I want, but you have to be searching for it. The clarity is everything.
Thank you for that. That's really at the core of everything. I love it.
Yeah.
Lauren, you mentioned your program earlier, and I know about it, and I think it's amazing. I'd love to hear about that a little bit. And then can you also tell us where listeners could find you?
Yeah. So my program that I launched, I started in January, and it's called the Virtuosity Blueprint. It's a 6-month program, all online. It's a group program. So we do a mix of one-on-one time with me and my students and group classes. So basically, I was looking for a way to sort of have, for lack of a better term, a conservatory of my own. And so we do, the group classes are studio class, so Masterclasses, the students play, I give them feedback, and we're all in a group chat together. And also technique class, where I just, talk about specific techniques that I feel the group needs to improve on. They can ask questions, that kind of thing. And then, of course, the one-on-one time, which are the private lessons. And like I said, that's 6 months long, and I have the most wonderful students a part of it. It's really been a dream come true. I can't believe that this is my job, to be honest. So that's what I mean when I program. It's basically my education program. And you can find me by going to a website called google.com. And you can, if you type in Lauren Pierce bass, I'm the only Lauren Pierce that plays bass. I have a bunch of performance videos and lesson videos on my YouTube channel. You can find me on social media, on Instagram. It's Bassically Fabulous, and that's basically with 2 S's, because bass, get it? So, yeah. And then on Facebook, Lauren Pierce Bass. I have a lot of stuff on there, and yeah, those are the places where you can connect with me and see all the ridiculous stuff that I do on the instrument and just in my life.
Oh, that sounds fantastic. And I'm going to put links in the show notes for all of this.
Awesome.
Lauren, thank you so much. This was, I feel completely inspired, first of all, to go practice, but, I love so many of the things that you talked about, how you talk about clarity and really kind of finding your voice, It's wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you. This was so much fun. I never get to talk about this in this kind of way. And I am, like I said, such a nerd about practicing. So it's really a joy to have this space to just, rant about what I love. So thank you so much.
Thank you guys so much for listening. I hope you enjoy this chat with Lauren Pierce. As I said in the intro, I feel completely inspired by her enthusiasm, her deep love of music, and her incredibly mindful approach to practicing and to leading her life. I think Lauren shows us that dedicating ourselves fully to what we're passionate about and listening to our instinct is the way to a life and career that fulfills us. Lauren and I would love to know what your favorite takeaways from today's conversation are, so please get in touch with us. Search for Lauren Pierce and Mind Over Finger on both Instagram and Facebook and share your thoughts with us. And of course, I'll have all those links for you in the show notes. Now, I'm really excited to invite you to join me for a special 3-part live masterclass on all things practicing and performing. I'm going to discuss efficient practice systems and powerful mindsets that lead to optimal performance. So I hope you join me live on April 20th, 21st, and 22nd at 11 Central, 12 p.m. Eastern, and bring your questions and thoughts on building a super effective practice and performance preparation regimen. I'll have all the info and the sign-up details for you in the show notes and at mindoverfinger.com. I can't wait to discuss optimal performance with you. So that's it for today. I hope you and yours stay safe and healthy. Again, thank you, and à bientôt.